Okay, thank you. So it's 8:30 on August 21st. We're calling the Finance Committee meeting to order. The first item on our agenda is a review of the fiscal 20 financial results. So I'll kick it off to Rich.
So we have closed the fiscal year 20. We did end the year with a positive balance of $569,507, or 0.57%. General education RCs had a surplus of $489,711. And the special education RCs had a positive surplus of $79,796. This is slightly better than the May forecast, which was about $527,000 to the positive. Just to go over some of the highlighted areas, RC1, again, previously reports we had salary savings of a little over $5,000. Student interns, again, had a positive balance of $600. Substitutes did end the year with a positive balance of $42,899 due to the school closure. And then the various operating accounts, which we did include a Schedule 4, had a positive balance of $34,622. The Fitch Academy, RC2, salary savings of a little over $5,000, and then again those various operating accounts savings of $8,696. Middlesex, salary savings of $13,384. Student interns again ended the year with a positive balance of $600. Substitutes did end the year with a positive balance of $28,699. And then those various operating accounts such as textbooks, periodicals, supplies, and police ended the year with a positive $29,919. RC5 Hinley had salary savings of $9,147. Student interns did end the year again with a positive balance of $600. Substitute savings of just over $1,100, and those various operating accounts a savings of $10,849. Homes did have salary savings of a little over $28,000. As reported in previous months, the student interns did end with a positive balance of $7,800. Substitutes had a small savings of $759, and then various operating accounts a little over $2,700. Oxbridge also had salary savings of a little over $2,000. Again, student interns a positive $600, and then substitute savings of $200, and then the various operating accounts $5,655. Royal RC9 had salary savings of $8,428. Substitute savings of just over $3,500, and then the various operating accounts such as textbooks and supplies, $13,426. RC10 Tokenique, salary savings of a little over $5,300, substitute savings of a little over $2,400, and then again those various operating accounts such as textbooks and supplies, savings of $21,893. RC11, athletics and PE, custodial overtime related to the YMCA, a favorable balance of just over $2,300. The weight room ended with a favorable balance of $3,700. Interscholastic stipends, a favorable balance of $13,789. Intramurals had a cumulative savings of just over $29,000. Athletic transportation did end the year with a favorable balance of just over $110,000. Sports officials, a favorable balance of just shy of $45,000. And then again, the various operating accounts had a surplus of $3,723. And then the interscholastic account did end the year as in a deficit of $33,685, and those were to the pre-purchase of the uniforms approved by the Board of Ed. RC12 maintenance, we did have salary savings of $293. Overtime, just over $9,500. As mentioned previously, we did suspend regular trash removal services during the closure. That yielded savings of just over $12,000. As we mentioned previously, we did have suspension of cleaning services during the school closure by the outside cleaning company, and then that also resulted in a little over $47,000 in savings. We did need emergency repairs to some refrigerators, which did cause a deficit in the emergency repair account by $36,000. This typically would have been paid out of the food service account, but given that school was closed and there was no revenue collected from March to June, this expense did hit facilities. And then various operating accounts cumulative savings of $25,051. As in previous reports, snow removal ended the year with a favorable balance of $42.68. And then field and building rental, we collected $125,122, which was about $86,000 short of budget. We did lose an anticipated $87,400 in revenue from about 22 different groups. RC13 did have salary savings of $704. The various operating accounts, again, cumulative savings of a little over $11,000. And then various equipment accounts, 117. RC 14, various operating accounts a little over 11,000. Art equipment, favorable balance of $74. An RC 15 technology, savings in the copy center of $441. The various operating accounts saved about $1,900, and then equipment was a deficit of $205,000. And again, that was due to the pre-purchase of the iPads and routers approved by the Board of Education. RC 16, there was savings of $4,951 from the superintendent's contractual expenditures. Consulting services left a positive balance of $4,875. Legal fees did end the year with a positive $46,458. And then various operating accounts, cumulative savings of just over $17,000. RC 17 health, substitute savings of $12,454, and then those various operating accounts again of $16,431. In RC 18, budget control again was not utilized this past year. That is a favorable balance of $263,000. Long-term substitutes left a positive balance of $18,676. Substitutes for professional development did leave a positive balance of $13,024. And again, various operating accounts, a cumulative savings of $15,472. RC 19 did have salary savings from turnover of just over $1,000. Various operating accounts, including professional development, field trips, resource materials, a cumulative savings of $32,725. And then textbooks was a deficit of about $130,000, and that was again due to the pre-purchase approved by the Board of Ed for textbooks. RC 20 finance, auditing services did end the year with a favorable $184, and then those various operating accounts a little over $1,200. RC 21 library, various operating accounts ended the year with a favorable balance of just over $25,000. RC 22 technology education, those various operating accounts a cumulative savings of $7,350. RC 23 adult ed contracted services did have a positive balance of $5,000. The various operating accounts a cumulative savings of just over $50, and as discussed previously, summer school revenue was under budget by $427,000. RC 24 special education did have salary savings of $67,888. Substitute savings of just over $39,000, homebound tutoring of $16,000, contracted speech did end the year with $3,700 to the favorable, contracted OT year-end savings of $800, and then PT a little over $1,100. Consulting services did end the year with a positive balance of $81,315. Legal services did end the year with a positive balance of just shy of $53,000. Those various operating accounts, such as textbooks and teaching supplies, favorable balance of just under $3,000. Transportation did end the year with a favorable balance of $26,000. Tuition, public schools did end the year with a favorable balance of just under $41,000. Tuition non-public ended the year with a favorable balance of $35,950. As we reported in previous reports, excess cost was received at $2,566,258, which was approximately $285,000 less than budget. The entitlement cap was reduced to 70.89%. As we did mention in previous reports, as is the case every year, excess cost gets audited. The receipts are based on your March 1st filing, which was before school closure. So there is an adjustment that occurs every year. Typically, the adjustment is relatively small, but due to the school closure, we are anticipating that adjustment to be significant, likely in excess of $250,000. That amount is typically tied to the ECS payment sent to the town in April. RC 25 fixed. Transportation ended the year with a favorable balance of just over $17,000. Fuel oil, natural gas ended the year with a favorable balance of a little over $32,000. Water did end the year with a deficit of a little over $9,000. That is in part due to some water repairs that had to happen at Ox Ridge. Electricity ended the year with a favorable balance of just over $27,000. Telephone ended the year with a favorable balance of just over $2,500. Sewer service ended the year with a favorable balance of $3,900. Workers' compensation had a positive $1,100. Health insurance ended the year with a favorable $158,000. And then Medicaid reimbursement revenue was just over $7,000. Finally, RC 26, there were salary savings of $30,346, substitute savings of $2,200. Those various operating accounts just over $8,800, And then, as we mentioned in previous reports, ELP tuition did fall short of the budget by about $46,000.
Does anyone have questions on that review? Mike?
Kind of question, and I know it says it on the report for the people who are watching via Zoom. So this figure includes all the pre-buys. So if the pre-buys had not occurred, the surplus would be 569 plus the 387.
Correct. So we would have been in excess of 900,000.
Okay, thank you.
Correct.
It also includes, just to qualify, the budget control.
Right.
Okay, John?
Mike had my question just as a follow-up to that. If the 957, that's a higher number than you last presented to us, right?
So in April, we had assumed it would be a little over $900,000. So it was assuming without the pre-purchases. So it ended up being a little bit higher. One of the main drivers is legal fees for both special education and general education ended up coming in under budget.
Awesome, thank you.
Anything else? Jill?
Just for the purposes of us all remembering that this year that we do have the summer school, we're under budget by 427, but in the future we would also, were something like this to happen, we'd also see the costs.
Correct. So we haven't prepared the new year financials, but one of the things we will report is summer school revenue did exceed expectations, which is a positive. But you'll also see, obviously, the expenditures go up because we had more courses that kids enrolled in,
Right.
but overall a favorable balance to the budget in the future.
Thank you.
Yep.
On RC7, just reiterating that salary savings went up a little bit. That's all due to the long-term leave of absence, unpaid leave of absence.
We did have a leave of absence, and then we had some funds that were encumbered for a maternity leave that we were holding, anticipating that the teacher would come back, but they did not come back for that.
And then on RC11, I just noticed that the interscholastic stipends,
Sure.
the favorable balance has come down from what you
Did.
forecasted in June, so I'm just curious what happened there.
So there were a couple sports that did end up running virtually that we weren't anticipating, and so the stipend ended up being approved.
And just curious, what sports were those?
I would have to get back. I don't have that
Okay.
offhand.
Maybe just for the meeting, I'm just
Sure.
more curious than anything. And then again, the field, the rentals, I'm sorry, I thought you were pointing at me.
Oh, sorry, no. I thought you
Okay.
were messaging me.
I have questions, so if you guys have questions, just raise your hand and I'll stop and I can resume later. Just with the field and the field rental revenue, so again, is that just we got more than we anticipated from our June review?
We did get a little bit more. So we did open up the fields really in the end of June. So we collected a little bit more money towards that last month of school. We were anticipating, had school not closed, to get about another $87,000.
Okay, great. And then over to RC24. I'm guessing most of tuition public, school, tuition non-public, that's all going to be an impact to ECR as well?
Correct. So part of that will be the adjustment that we referenced in RC24. Because certain services just didn't occur during the school closure, certain expenditures didn't have to occur. So the adjustment to ECR will be for the fiscal year 20. Typically what happens, as I mentioned, is we always file on March 1st, and that March 1st is based on the forecast to June 30th. And typically there are small changes that occur. Maybe a student leaves district, or maybe you get another student coming in, but it's usually pretty minimal because of the period's only 3 months. A lot changed in those 3 months in this past school year. So certain expenditures that were anticipated on that March filing didn't happen.
So I guess just, I know we're in communication with the town, but just to make sure that they're continually aware of that number and what's probably going to happen in April of 21. And the other thing is we can talk about maybe a little bit later is the ECR that we've heard some rumblings that they're already talking about a lower number than what we have budgeted for fiscal year 21. So I think that's another thing that we really need to keep an eye on, because I don't think that's included in what you're forecasting for the additional expenses for fiscal year 21.
They haven't officially announced what the entitlement cap will be. Typically that announcement doesn't happen, a final entitlement cap, until February 21. The expectation of most school districts is it will be reduced pretty significantly. Typically what happens is the state has a pot of money, and then once submissions come in, they allocate that pot of money. The expectation is the state will just have less money to allocate based on increases in expenditures. So we are anticipating it to be lower. Some numbers have come out as low as 68%, but nothing has been confirmed as yet.
Okay, but at this point, we anticipate returning to the town $569,900 or $507.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions on those? Jill?
RC 12 on maintenance, the repairs to the refrigerator, with the new food service contract in place, I'm assuming we would, I know sometimes when you negotiate contracts, you might include some sort of facilities fees,
Yep.
things like that. Did we negotiate anything like that?
So there is
or-
a capital investment with the new food service provider, Chartwell's. It's approximately $300,000. We anticipate really that starting in year 2 of the contract, just because of the timing, the unusual start to the school year. Again, with this, we typically would fund an expense like this out of the food service fund, but given revenues essentially were zero for the last 3 months of the year, it was not feasible.
Thank you.
John?
And then my last question is, when you look at all the salary savings throughout the RCs, how does this stack up relative to previous years? Is there anything extraordinary in this past year versus previous years?
So there were some positions that ended up just becoming vacant due to natural turnover before the closure, and then based on those positions, we chose not to fill them just because we were all remote. So, for an example, a nurse, a couple of para positions, the in-house transportation driver. I think if we had a regular school year and a normal school year, we would have had a little bit of salary savings, the gap between when that person left and a new hire was brought on board. But it just obviously didn't make sense given that the school wasn't open to fill those positions at the time.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else on that review of the year end? So we can move on, we can talk about the budget transfers then?
So there are no transfers for the end of the fiscal year.
Okay, that's easy enough. Can we move on then to the fiscal year 21, the reopening expenditures?
So as we discussed previously, when we do fiscal year 21, we are going to include a cost center in the monthly financial reports that clearly identify the reopening costs in a clear manner. So you'll not only see that in the narrative that we do for the new fiscal year, but also the actual financial report. That'll be towards the end of the financial report. But all the items that we highlight here will be in that, including any additional items that may arise. They will all be in a deficit as there's no funding yet approved. And so one of two things can happen. Either transfers can be recommended to the Board of Ed in increments, and then if approved, brought into that cost center, or if a supplemental appropriation is approved by the Board of Education, the Board of Finance, and the RTM, and then that appropriation would go into that cost center. So we did provide an estimate of where we currently stand with reopening expenditures. They are highlighted in the categories of staffing, facilities, technology, materials, and transportation. There are some items that still remain unknown, which will need more information in order to get a better estimate. One of the primary items being electricity. We are going to purge our central HVAC systems each day, which does consume more electricity both in the morning and at night. We really do need to wait to see how that increase in demand looks before we can give a firm estimate. There are some staffing positions that remain unfilled. We have assumed for the ones that have not been filled a Master Step 10 and benefits of an employee plus one. So obviously if they're brought in under Master Step 10, the salary would be less than what's shown here. If the benefits are either a single, it would be less, or if it's a family benefit package, it could be more. But that's our estimate for us right now. Substitute costs for staff who might potentially have to be out due to the need to self-quarantine is also unknown. And then currently custodial overtime for any staff member who potentially might be out due to the need to self-quarantine. So currently we are anticipating expenditures of $1,742,494. We have submitted for and been approved by the State Department of Education a reimbursement of $134,611. So that would bring that amount down to $1,607,883. Just to highlight some items that we ordered, and then we can go through the actual list of expenditures. We have in excess of 50,000 PPEs, including disposable masks, reusable masks, clear masks, and face shields. In excess of 50,000 gloves, isolation gowns and shoe covers, hand washing stations, touchless hand sanitizer stations, storage containers, which will be used to remove a lot of the items that are in classrooms to create more space, 450 IPVO document cameras, 10 ViewSonic displays to turn certain rooms into classrooms, and then some bike racks to accommodate students who have opted out of transportation. So when we look at staffing, of the $1.7 million, a little over $1 million relates to staffing. There are 7 teacher positions, a 3rd grade at Hindley, a 2nd grade at Holmes, a 4th grade at Holmes, a 1st grade at Royal, a 4th grade at Royal, a 5th grade at Tokenique, and a 3rd grade at Oxbridge. This is all done in order to space the desks out 3 feet apart and then 6 feet from the teacher. We are looking to add 7 part-time custodians to help with cleaning during the day, 4 LPNs, a slight increase to a nurse at Tokenique, some staff development, and then one of that item I mentioned earlier, substitute coverage that we're unsure of right now. So it's a little over $1 million. When we go to facilities, that amount is about $391,000. It includes over $150,000 for plexiglass partitions, hand washing stations, touchless hand sanitizer stations, PPEs, the bike racks that I mentioned. We will need additional custodial supplies due to additional cleaning, so things like wipes and mops, sprays, disinfectants, the HVAC independent evaluation, the Connex boxes for storage. We have added signage throughout the schools. There will be some tents added at the high school. Mike Lynch is working on adding some air conditioning units to the 4 elementary schools that don't have air conditioning, as they will be used for space for students. Custodial overtime for cleaning, I mentioned that, electricity purge, and then food delivery carts. So all told, about $391,000. Moving to technology, the amount is a little over $250,000, though about $92,000 of that will be reimbursed by the Connecticut State Department of Education. It includes increasing our internet speed. That is to handle a lot of the remote sessions that will happen, enhancements to the firewall for that same reason. Charging stations for the elementary devices, since devices can't be shared, we need additional charging stations. Those IPVO document cameras that I mentioned. Chromebook covers for the K2 level, as the expectation is that those students will start bringing those devices home. The ViewSonics that I mentioned, Zoom will have to be renewed in April. And then the participant upgrade, so we did upgrade the participation from 300 to 1,000. And then some software titles, Screencastify, Book Creator, Seesaw, and then some additional devices for some of the additional staff that's mentioned. And then materials, it's about $32,000. We're still working on getting additional quotes and information. This is primarily because students are expected not to share materials that they previously otherwise would have. And then bus sanitation, it's a little under $9,000. This will include a sanitation spray, Zuno Z1, and then a daily kind of bleach and hand wash of the seats between the tiers. So as of right now, we stand at $1.74 million with reimbursement of $134,000, so a gross amount of $1.6 million.
Thank you, Rich. Questions, Mike?
Thanks for this, Rich. I guess first, I mean, there are a number of these expenses that are or could grow. Like, for instance, the bus cleaning fee of $8,800. Is that for the year, or is it for a quarter? Or?
So it is for the year.
Okay.
Obviously, if we need more deep cleaning than as anticipated, it could grow slightly. But it's a wand, so there's a piece of equipment that first student will have. They will be able to spray the buses in the morning and at night. And then it's really, during the tiers, it's like a rag with, bleach to clean the seats, the touch points, the handrails, things like that.
Like, in a quick follow-up, and then I'll just be...
Okay, because I kind of have a follow-up on that, too.
Oh,
Go ahead.
No, then you go. That's fine.
No, I just was wondering, so first student is asking us to provide them with the cleaning supplies. They're not providing that.
No, so they are providing it, but it's their cost of labor to actually implement it.
Oh, so this is what we're seeing here is just the labor cost
Correct.
associated with it. Gotcha. Thank you.
And then these figures assume, full attendance. I know that we've put surveys in the field, like how many people plan to come, but these numbers assume that the 4,700 or so students that we anticipate will all be in the class. And this doesn't include, obviously, what you say in the opening, the top page of your memo, the expenses that are undeterminable at this point.
Correct. So the unknown costs, so whether it's substitute costs or the electricity demand for the purge, Those are not included. For the electricity, for example, we just need more data points to make a firm estimate. Same with substitute coverage as well. But there are also certain costs here that are in estimates that can go up or down. As I mentioned, the salaries for the teachers and the benefits for the teachers, that can be firmed up once we actually have hiring done.
All right, thank you.
Gotcha. Jill?
Thank you for isolating the costs in this form. I appreciate the clarity of the report. I have a few questions about using this report to manage going forward. I see in here, for example, all of the elementary sections, and I know those we actually technically had budgeted for, so they're not an incremental cost. So my first question is, how on here can we see what is an incremental cost versus, I know we're spending the money a little differently, but we did have it. It's not
So there's
Go ahead.
Sure. So there's a budget for 106 elementary sections, and then obviously 2 sections in budget control for 108.
Right.
So we're at currently 103 for enrollment sections, and then these 7. So we're technically 2 over.
Okay.
So at some point in the future, the decision will have to be made whether or not the recommendation should be a transfer first from those unfilled enrollment positions, and then if those are approved by the Board of Ed, they would go in that kind of COVID RC bucket that we talked about.
Okay.
If they're not approved as a transfer, then you're kind of looking at your net number here. This is reflective as a gross number. Obviously, if typically when you ask for a supplemental appropriation, you'll look for identifying areas, whether it's salary savings or contractual savings or whatever you might have, and then recommend those as transfers to kind of offset that. And so really what we're showing here is the gross number before any potential offsets, and then those offsets would have to be approved by the board.
Okay. So related to offsets then, I would expect, for example, the substitute number for professional development that we have to be pretty different because we are now taking Fridays off and we've put 3 PD days at the beginning of the year plus the ones we already have. So I hope that that's a number that we might, I understand it may need to go into other kind of substitutes, but I would hope that.
Correct. So it's likely that this year will be a much more dynamic and rolling budget than probably in the past. So there will probably be categories that will identify, and they could be as small as $1,000. It could be as high as $100,000 if it's a position.
Right.
That will have to be adjusted. So we'll probably see a lot more transfers than we likely normally would have in the past.
Sure.
And that will just be kind of the nature of the fact that it's an unusual school year with an unusual opening.
Okay.
You'll also see on the board meeting on Tuesday evening, we haven't touched the budget control, so the 103 and the enrollment just sits as 103 and the 7 of COVID.
Yeah.
And those COVID ones, just for anybody who's concerned or watching, we go over to each school, and when someone says something's going to trip, we try and move children around, grade levels around, and be very sure that this is not an enrollment increase versus a COVID requirement. So you'll see that story play out at the board meeting next week. Okay,
so you are going to walk us through those, the understanding of the framework you used to make those decisions, whether you were trying to hit the 3-foot mark or...
These are included here as COVID just to hit the 3-foot mark, yes.
To hit the 3-foot mark, yeah. Okay. One more question related to the format. Thank you for that, Ellen. And some of these, would any of these be eligible for FEMA? And if so, could we be tracking that here as well?
So there is a priority list in terms of how you have to submit for FEMA. So we did have to submit for the CSDE reimbursement first. So now that we've submitted for that, we actually did provide the town with the expenditures related to fiscal year 20 to attempt to submit for reimbursement. And I believe we included that in the packet as well. Depending on if there are any other additional funding available by the CSDE, we would have to submit for that first, and then you essentially could kind of go to maybe like CARES Act and then eventually FEMA. So these are not, we haven't submitted anything for fiscal 21 yet because we actually haven't paid some of those bills yet, and we also have to actually pay it before we can submit for reimbursement.
Okay, thank you.
John.
So just to clarify, this page, it's not a page number, but the schedule of anticipated reopening cost estimates, that's a total gross number.
Correct.
Okay, so just for those looking out there, it seems like there's going to be some material offsets. You just talked about some of the teachers and that sort of thing. So if you can help us through the offset list as it builds,
Sure.
That would be really helpful. It sounds like you already had.
Yep, so I mean, as Dr. Adley mentioned as an example, budget control, that could conceivably be an offset to some of the teachers if it's approved by the Board of Education.
And then other activities that might be,
Correct.
Mitigated or just.
Correct, so those would kind of be those transfers that we would have to bring forward throughout the year. A good example might be transportation, actually. We're not running transportation on Fridays for the first month of school. We do pay a daily rate. It won't obviously amount to millions, but the thousands of dollars here or there, we can actually recommend as a transfer to such like cover the bus sanitation costs.
I mean, what I tried to do was look at last year's cost savings as you outlined and said, what could be applied this year perhaps, given the different school model. And so.
Okay, so just building on that, there'll be activities that possibly won't run, so there'll be savings due to that. So there'll be a lot of things, hopefully not, but if we have to close school, there would be the potential to then save money as well. So I think what's happening is we're getting a good look at what the gross costs will be, but we, over time, will hear more about what the net number will be based on what cost savings could potentially be realized and other things like budget control.
Correct.
Right.
I mean, we would bring those as recommended transfers, and then if approved, it would start kind of buying down that gross number, and you'd get more of a net look.
Right. So I guess my questions more revolve around the process of how this and like timing, with the timing, and I guess I'll look to you and the entire board and this committee to opine on what that process would look like in terms of when do we need to start talking to the Board of Finance about numbers, and just how does the board feel about that, and how are we going to work the transfers between the broad categories that statutorily, that's the way we're supposed to structure our transfers, is based on the state statute. So how does this new COVID RC or whatever it's going to be structured at, how does that tie into what we statutorily need to do pursuant to the law, and just make sure that we're doing everything that we're supposed to be doing under the law. And then I have
one other question.
Yep, go ahead. I'm still looking through it.
And this list is assuming that we do go back full-time or modified full-time?
Does, yes. It plans for that, yes.
Okay, so this is per the plan as outlined last Board of Education.
Yeah, there will be just, Madam Chair and the other board members here, there will be modifications to this, because I can tell you, right, like as of yesterday, I know we're going to add to a certain line item here, like additional plexiglass and different things, so it's just a wee bit fluid, but...
It's very fluid. But I guess I would look to this committee, and I guess maybe I'll ask each one of you to just let me know where you think we should be right now in the process. I think, Jill, you were the one that wanted to start the process of talking about this information, so where do you think we should start talking to the Board of Finance? Do you think we should just keep the discussion at the Board of Ed level? Where do you, at this point, I'd just love to get a sense of the committee where they come out on that.
Well, sure. I think we're in really early stages. I mean, I think we should be in discussion with the Board of Finance. It's just good practice to be in discussion with the Board of Finance so that they're aware of what's happening. But I don't think it's time for excuse me, a frog. You can't drink water. I don't think it's time to actually do anything formal, because I think this number is way too preliminary. We have, in a few weeks' time, things could shift a lot. But I do think, sitting down with them and just having a more, if you want to do that as the budget chair, just a quick, just keeping them in the loop, I think that's appropriate. But I don't think we're at a formal stage. Although we could brief them, but I don't think we're at formal ask.
Mike?
I agree. I think to the extent that we can let them know what we know
Right.
is helpful, but also letting them know that we may wait to have more clarity on these numbers before we do our ask, but when we do our ask, we're going to need action quickly.
Yes.
So they just know everything.
I think that's so nice. Thank you.
That would be, that would be my view. I don't want there, and I know the good folks over there are ready, willing, and able to address these things, but just that they know what we know, and if we come, we're going to need some help quickly.
Okay, thank you. John?
I mean, one of the things I was going to recommend to the full board is that we appoint a liaison or liaisons between the Board of Finance and the Board of Education this year, given the fluid nature of things and to enhance the communication. So you should certainly be one of those people. And brief them meeting by meeting where we stand. I think it's way too early for a formal request. We're going to see a list of offsets, I believe, and as the year goes on, it's going to be a really fluid situation. I mean, I know, for instance, the sports policy still has not even been ruled on by the CIAC, and that seems to be a moving target by the hour lately. So, but I think communication is key this year, and we should put in a formal, group of people that interact, and maybe we can get the same from the Board of Finance as well.
Okay, thank you. I do feel the same. I feel it's a little premature, obviously, to go with a formal ask, but I do believe that we should keep the Board of Finance informed. And clearly, the gross number is a high number, but we know there are going to be some significant offsets to that. But I think the more we can communicate directly with them, and I guess we can have a discussion during this line item or this agenda item on Tuesday night in terms of what the full board. I'm happy to be one of the people, and I, as the chair, Tara should probably be part of that process as well. But I'll leave that to the full board to opine on when we meet on Tuesday night.
And let's not forget the RTM as well.
Right, of course. The first step in the process would be the Board of Finance, and then we could circle in as well with Jack Davis and FMB, and then the Education Committee as well from the RTM. So, of course, they're the next phase of the process, but the first phase would be the Board of Finance, and we can obviously do that together, collectively, keep them informed as we move along this process. And I do see some members of FMB on the meeting today, so that's great, Bert. So anyway, any more questions on that review of fiscal year 21?
Just to make a comment, just to update you and also make a comment, complete the question actually, an answer to the question. So Tara and I, Board Chair, we've been in contact with the Board of Finance, obviously, and Chairman Sargowski. He has been apprised, not of this number because the board hasn't been apprised of this number, but has been apprised of the number at an earlier stage. So he knows the ballpark that we're in. He also has indicated that there will be certain forms perhaps that we would come and explain some of the expenses and to keep people up to date and so on and so forth. So that process, formally or informally, is in the works. So we can continue to do what we have to do with it, but certainly we can keep them apprised. And you've mentioned about the process moving forward. Essentially, as Richard said, we're going to be running deficits in certain areas until we assess where we can make transfers to.
And then legally, when we have to make a transfer approval, we would have to do that and make sure the funds are obviously
correct
there, because we can't transfer funds when they're not there.
Correct.
So, and I guess just to add on that, Dr. Adley, it's great that you're communicating already with the Board of Finance, but maybe tag in the RTM as well, because they are an integral part of that process and the last
Sure.
place we need to go to get that approval. So it'd be great. I'm sure Jack Davis would be happy to talk. Anything else on the fiscal year 21? Okay, so we can move to public comment, and I guess that's Chris going to help us with that.
So if anyone viewing would like to comment, just hit the raise hand icon under the participants tab at the bottom of your screen. Let's give it a few more seconds.
Sure.
Mr. Tramper, will you just confirm that they can hear you? I'm sure they can, but just
Hopefully you can hear him. Is he muted? No. I guess we're talking.
I'm going to say it again. But you're going to get an echo. Anyone?
oh, you're okay.
Anyone with public comment, you can hit the raise your hand icon at this time. I'm not seeing anyone for public comment.
Thank you, and just a big thank you to Rich and Dr. Adley for the preparation of all these materials. It's really a great, very detailed document, as always. Thank you. And so now, motion to adjourn. All in favor, thank you. We're adjourned.